Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Nazim, and I'm here to break down the phenomenal card that we've got this weekend. UFC 295, the light heavyweight championship, the vacant light heavyweight championship on the line, the interim heavyweight championship on the line as well. It's a stacked card from top to bottom. I absolutely love this card. Even the fights that I feel that the casual fans won't know. I think they're good stylistic fights. So really excited to get into it, to break it all down, and obviously look forward to watching it on the night. I genuinely think that, it's going to be a great card. I feel like the fights are going to deliver. Super excited for it. But just before we get into the breakdowns, as always, there is going to be a Base AI recap from last weekend from our UFC prediction software here at MMA Play 365. There was only an outcome of 8 fights, I believe, out of the entire card, because obviously we had the draw. Then, of course, there was the fight cancellation on the night as well with Rodolfo Vieira and Armen Petrosyan. So, look, there is going to be a recap from it. Again, it did a good job, to be fair, from the fights that did take place. So, again, I'll talk about 4 or 5 fights in regards to the AI and how the fights played out and the implied odds and where the value was, and there's a little bit of an education piece in there as always. So if you are interested in AI and in AI for MMA in the UFC, then make sure you check that out. It's always on our Base AI specific playlist on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/MMA Play 365. But now let's get straight into the breakdowns. We start, of course, as always, in the main event for the vacant UFC light heavyweight championship between Jiri Prochazka and Alex Pereira. Now remember, Jiri Prochazka is the champion that never actually got beat after he beat Glover Teixeira, after he finished and submitted Glover Teixeira, which is crazy, especially when you consider that Glover Teixeira is the coach of Alex Pereira as well, and Glover was, the elite black belt. Again, we can talk for days about that fight. It was a phenomenal fight, a fight that Prochazka was actually losing as well on the scorecards until he got that last minute, that last-ditch submission win, and of course won the title. But then after that, he had a bad injury, needed some surgery on his shoulder. I don't remember exactly what the problem was. It's normally, some muscle that's pulled away from some cartilage or something like that. But yeah, he was out for a lengthy period of time. He needed surgery, and instead of waiting and holding the division up, he did the honourable thing in, vacating the championship, which since he did that, obviously Jamall Hill became champion, and then he got an injury, and he's done the same thing, which is the reason why we've got a vacated championship, and this is the title fight. Now, from a stylistic perspective, both fighters are predominantly strikers. I do think if we see any wrestling or grappling, it's more likely to be on the Prochazka side, but again, I just don't see Prochazka really going to the wrestling and grappling here unless he feels that he's got a legit advantage there, and he feels that maybe Alex Pereira's striking is something that he doesn't want to deal with. But like I said, if we see any wrestling and grappling, I do expect it to be on Prochazka's side. I'd be shocked to see Pereira shoot takedowns here. But ultimately, I think this fight is going to be won and lost on the feet, just because both fighters are predominantly strikers. But they're also very different strikers. Prochazka, he's the unorthodox striker, weird movement, switches stances, fires in from different angles, a really creative striker that will take chances. And that's one thing that, he's got to be careful of in this fight, because from Alex Pereira's striking style, it's a very Muay Thai kickboxing style, slow, calm, patient movement, stalking forwards, plodding forwards, very reactive with his strikes, won't throw too many in regards to volume, but at the same time, he doesn't waste many strikes either. Whereas, again, like I said, with Prochazka, it's completely the opposite. He will fire a lot of volume. He will miss on some strikes as well. But again, he's very dangerous. Both fighters are very dangerous. So I think from Prochazka's perspective, he's got to be very careful that, he's not over-swinging and missing and allowing Alex Pereira to counter him. And if he doesn't do that, I actually think that, look, you could look at this in 2 different ways. You've got, like I say, you've got the creative, unorthodox approach from Prochazka, but then you've got the slow, deadly approach from Pereira. And normally, more often than not, I will tend to lean in these types of fights towards the creative striker, just because I feel that the volume's going to be there. And they're the fighter that's just got to make sure that they don't stay stationary or, make a mistake of overthrowing and being countered, because that's the possibility here. Now, the other side from Alex Pereira's perspective is, look, I bet Pereira against Blachowicz. I thought it was a fight that as long as he got past the wrestling, that he should be okay in. But there's concerns in that, and it was only a 3-round fight as well, if you remember. But there is concerns because, of course, he got wrestled in that first round. That was pretty much expected. But after that first round, Pereira went into the second round and completely took the fight to Blachowicz, and then Blachowicz is huffing and puffing on the stool between the second and third round, as he was between the first and second. And I'm sat there thinking with, a ticket on Pereira that, look, he's good here. Like, Blachowicz is tired. The wrestling's not going to be there. The striking's not been there. I've just seen him back up a ton and allow Pereira to control the fight. But then Pereira made that third round so close, not in regards, not just with volume, but then obviously with the wrestling as well. And I feel that was the round that Pereira should have really put a stamp on things and really took it away from Blachowicz, and he just didn't. And it turned out to be what was a razor close decision. I think, in my opinion, the right decision. But if it had gone to Jan Blachowicz, I wouldn't be sat here complaining. It was just one of those fights where, you get 10 different judges and you probably get 10 different outcomes. So, yeah, that's my worry with Pereira. Now, with Jiri Prochazka, there was concerns prior to the Glover fight about, how he'll look later in the fight. But Prochazka did look like he's a fighter that understands sort of the management of his gas tank and cardio. And with his creative approach in this fight, I do feel that he's going to land more on Pereira, which should give him the edge in winning the fight, because, again, there's a good chance that somebody gets knocked out in this fight. And that could be Prochazka. Pereira, like I said, he's got that really reactive, high-level kickboxing game. So Prochazka is going to be liable throughout his exchanges and throughout the strikes to get knocked out himself. But again, from a prediction and a pick perspective, when I'm looking at this fight, I will normally favour the creative striker, the one that moves a little bit more, a little bit different. He's going to be harder to prepare for than Pereira is. I think Pereira is going to be more of a stationary target for Prochazka, which suits Prochazka as well. And like I say, when you look at the last fight over 3 rounds, Pereira, even though he dominated that second round against Blachowicz, that third round, he didn't put a stamp on there as well, and there's red flags with that. So, look, it's a phenomenal title fight. Like I said, any of these fighters could get knocked out. It's only going to take one mistake or one bad game plan or one error. Anything can happen at this level. But like I say, from a pick and a prediction perspective, I do like the creative, unorthodox approach from Jiri Prochazka. And like I said, remember, he is the light heavyweight champion that never got dethroned originally and initially. So for those reasons and everything that I've mentioned, I'm picking Jiri Prochazka to win this fight and become the new UFC light heavyweight champion. And in the next fight, the co-main event, we've got the interim heavyweight championship between Sergei Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall. This fight is just unreal. I'm so excited for it. The reason it's come about, of course, it was supposed to be John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Jones pulled out with an injury. Again, I feel like he's going to have surgery. He's going to be out for maybe 8 months to a year. So rather than the UFC stripping him, which of course they're never going to do with John Jones, Dana White, I believe, said that he didn't want to disrespect Stipe Miocic, who he considers, the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. He didn't want to disrespect Miocic by making him fight for an interim championship. So he's going to wait for John Jones to come back from injury, and then Dana White can make that fight again. Now, in the meantime, we've got 2 guys that didn't want to sit on the sidelines and wait around, 2 fighters that have been on a tear, that are dangerous, that are at the top of the division. And it's actually good to see this new blood coming in, because we've watched in the recent MMA era and the UFC era of Pavlovich and Aspinall just making the way up through the rankings. They've both had setbacks, they've both come back from it, they're both looking better, sharp, and it's just a phenomenal fight. From the odds perspective, the last time I looked, this was a -110 pick'em. Tom Aspinall was around a -130, -135 favourite, but money's coming on Pavlovich at plus money, and I understand it. I think at -110, I don't want anything to do with this fight at -110 as a pick'em. If one of these fighters really gets out there as a plus money underdog, that's going to be the right side to bet, because the fight is borderline as close to a coin flip as you're ever going to get. Both fighters have got power, both are fast, both are explosive, both can take a punch, but both are also liable to get hit as well. So it's just crazy. Obviously, the extra advantage that most people, and I tend to agree with this to an extent, believe that Aspinall has over Pavlovich is the wrestling and grappling. I would say more specifically the grappling. Like, Pavlovich is difficult to take down. Of course, everyone's going to go back to that Overeem fight, but look, that was a long time ago. It was Pavlovich's first UFC fight. Overeem was always one of those veterans that will make it tough for your UFC debut. So since then, Pavlovich has tried to be taken down in previous fights. He does do a good job of, defending takedowns. He's big, he's strong, he's fast as well. He's also got a Greco-Roman wrestling background, which helps from the anti-wrestling, the defensive wrestling perspective. So for Aspinall to come in here and take him down, I think that's going to be the difficult part, if Aspinall chooses to do that. But where the big advantage would come in my opinion, is if Aspinall ended up on top of Pavlovich. So if Aspinall does do a good job of, shooting a takedown that Pavlovich doesn't see within an exchange or something like that, and Aspinall gets him down, there's going to be a big advantage there. In my opinion, that's the biggest gap in skill between both styles of fighters. But from Pavlovich's perspective, he's got more power, in my opinion, from a punch perspective, but he's also fast with his combinations. Whereas Aspinall, from his striking perspective, I don't think he is as powerful as Pavlovich, but he's certainly got the speed advantage within the movement, maybe a slight speed advantage within the striking as well, maybe a bit of a cleaner striker from a technical perspective. So, like I say, they match up really well, because it's not as if Aspinall doesn't have power, and it's not as if Pavlovich isn't fast himself. It's just we're literally splitting hairs here from the striking perspective, to where each fighter might have the very slight marginal edges over each other. I personally don't think that wrestling and grappling is going to play a factor in this fight. I'm not saying it won't, or it's a really low percentage. I just think that both fighters are going to strike, especially because both fighters can be hit as well. So I think once Pavlovich lands a few on Aspinall and Aspinall lands a few on Pavlovich, both fighters in that moment will think, you know what, I've got this guy in front of me, I can hit him, and I believe in my power, and I know I can knock him out. And I think that's going to be the mindset, and therefore that leads to a fight that is won and lost on the feet. Now, when it comes to a pick and a prediction, it's tough, but I am going to side with the Englishman in Tom Aspinall, not just because I'm English myself, but because, look, Aspinall has power also. I've said this already, but the slight movement and speed advantages that Aspinall's going to have might allow him to be able to land on Pavlovich at just that bit of a higher clip. And like I just said with Prochazka, who in a fight with two powerful guys, whoever's landing the more punches gives himself that better opportunity of finishing the fight. And in a fight that is likely to be finished, it's tough to be ultra confident in the other side. But like I said, this fight's crazy, and Pavlovich, he lands combinations in big bombs with speed as well, really good forward pressure and aggressive. So it's just not, any outcome of this fight is not going to surprise me at all. But like I said, from the pick and prediction, I'll never sit on a fence. I'll always give one. And I believe the speed and the movement advantages is just something I like a little bit better. And that's in Tom Aspinall. So for those reasons, I'm picking Tom Aspinall to win this fight and become the new UFC interim heavyweight champion. And in the next fight, we're in the women's strawweight division for an interesting fight between Jessica Andrade and Mackenzie Dern. And yeah, it's interesting to see how this fight plays out. It's always the same with Mackenzie Dern. Her MO is to get the fight down to the mat. She's probably the most credentialed BJJ player in the entire UFC, maybe in the entire MMA world. But yes, her BJJ is elite, and you just don't want to be on the mat with her. Now, with Jessica Andrade here will want to keep the fight standing, try and strike with Dern, land combinations. Andrade has always been known for that forward pressure, aggressive nature, where she is landing combinations. She's got good power at this weight as well. We've seen her knock fighters clean out with just one punch. So that's where she's going to believe that she has the advantages. Now, the thing is with Mackenzie Dern, she's actually improving her striking. You look at last time out against Angela Hill, sure, she had the 3 takedowns and she had some good work completed on the mat against Angela Hill, but she's racking up over 100 plus strikes in a fight. And again, the decent numbers, and it just shows a development in Dern. Now, if this is a 15-minute kickboxing fight, there's just no way Dern wins, in my opinion. If it's a 15-minute grappling bout, there's just no way Andrade wins. So it's a very binary fight, very obvious from a stylistic perspective, and it's just which way you decide that you like the best. Now, the only thing that concerns me with Andrade is, it's not the age, but it's the slight decline that I believe we're seeing from her. But it's not a decline where she's going to go in there against low level of competition and lose, or she's looking chinny or anything like that. It's the level of decline at the highest level, and that actually speaks to a lot of respect for Jessica Andrade, because Andrade has been at the top of the division, multiple divisions, for a very long time. But I just feel that she's losing that ability to now be able to compete with the best women in the division. She's on a 3-fight losing streak, but Erin Blanchfield, Yan Xiaonan, Tatiana Suarez, these aren't fighters that you can really say anything negative about Jessica Andrade. And the fact that she's lost them, the slightly concerning thing is she's been finished in all of those fights, and again, that's what gives me an indication that she might just not be there anymore with the top of the division. Now, with Mackenzie Dern, I think that Dern has got to look for takedowns here. Jessica Andrade can be taken down, and if she is taken down and settled, then that's where I think Dern's going to have some success. But like I said, it depends if Dern can get the takedowns. In my opinion, it's another really close fight. And again, looking at the fight, the one question you just have to ask yourself is, can Mackenzie Dern take Jessica Andrade down? And how you answer that question depends on probably where you're going to go with your pick and your prediction. I do think Mackenzie Dern can get Andrade down. Do I think she can get her down in 2 out of the 3 rounds and survive getting knocked out? I think it's a good possibility, and that's why I'm sort of leaning towards Mackenzie Dern in this fight. Because look, it's going to be very sketchy early on for Dern. She's got to not rush, be patient, let Andrade throw some strikes at her so she can make reads. But again, when all's said and done, when we're looking at this fight, should it go 3 rounds, or should the fight even get finished? From the finishing perspective, yes, Andrade could finish Dern, but I think the finishing upside sits with Dern because of the elite BJJ and the fact that Andrade has been finished in the last 3 fights. Dern's striking is improving. Is it enough to beat Andrade in a striking fight? No, but it's good enough to make her more comfortable in setting the takedowns up, which has always been key to Dern's game and something she has always lacked. If she can use the strikes to really start getting some good entries into takedowns, then I think she gets the takedowns here. Could potentially submit Andrade, but if she doesn't, I think she'll get enough control over the 3 rounds to be able to win on the scorecard. So for those reasons, I'm picking Mackenzie Dern to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is an amazing fight. It's within my top 3 fights that I'm looking forward to on the card. The first, of course, being that interim heavyweight championship fight between Pavlovich and Aspinall. There's another fight within that 3 that's a little bit later that I'll talk about, a little bit of a low-key one that's flying under the radar, but this one's second. It's right up there. We've got Pat Sabatini versus Diego Lopes. Both fighters, elite grapplers, elite BJJ. They dominate opponents on the mat. Like, look at what Lopes did to Gavin Tucker. Like, who does that to Gavin Tucker? Gavin Tucker's a legit BJJ black belt himself, by the way, with really good striking, really good wrestling, and he shot in straight away against Diego Lopes, and it took Lopes like less than 90 seconds, I think, to find a submission off his back. At this level, fighters don't really get submitted with arm bars and triangles off the back after a takedown. And especially, like I said, with Gavin Tucker being a legit BJJ black belt himself, at this level in the UFC, it's very, very rare that you'll see that. So that speaks to the level of Lopes' grappling. And we saw that in the Evloev fight as well. Like, Lopes came into that fight, short notice, UFC debut, and took on Movsar Evloev, who is an unbeaten beast. And yeah, he lost the fight, but man, there was moments where he nearly had Evloev out of there. And if Evloev was even an iota of a lesser of a fighter than what he is, he would have been submitted. So Lopes, legit BJJ. Sabatini the same as well. Look, Sabatini's got that. He's not so much of, I'm not saying he's not a threat from a submission perspective, because of course he is, but he's a bit of a different BJJ player where he prefers to be on top and have some topside control. He seems to be very heavy topside, has that heavy wrestling top pressure game. So we could see a scenario here where Sabatini is on top, Lopes is on the bottom, and that's where both fighters prefer to fight. And there's a little bit of a risk with that from Lopes's perspective, because if Lopes can't submit Sabatini and Sabatini is just on top with Lopes trying to submit him, then that's normally going to favour the fighter on top from a judge's scorecards perspective. And if there's a lot of control time and no finish, then that type of fight is likely to go to a decision. But the thing is, Lopes is literally that dangerous on the mat that it begs the question if Sabatini is going to actually try and take him down, which I feel like he has to win the fight, because the striking I'll move on to in a minute. In regards to the wrestling, Sabatini is the better wrestler. Like, there's no doubt in my mind about that. Sabatini is the more likely fighter to shoot a takedown. He's the more fluid and the more explosive wrestler, the more skilled wrestler out of the two. It's just when the fight hits the mat, I believe that Diego Lopes is the better grappler. Even though Pat Sabatini is a legit BJJ black belt, that's great. But like I've already said, Gavin Tucker was also a legit BJJ black belt, and look what happened to him. So it does beg the question of if Sabatini is going to shoot at Lopes. But like I said, I believe he has to, because when you look at the striking, I think Diego Lopes' striking is really underrated. I think he's got some pop in his strikes. He's fundamentally sound. He'll mix things up. And look, Sabatini can strike as well. Like, he's got some good low kicks. He's got some good combinations. But he's liable to be hit, and his durability is a little bit of a red flag. I think he can be hit. I think he can be hurt. And I think because of that, he's going to be forced into wrestling. Because he's not, in my opinion, the better striker, he's going to be forced into taking the fight where Lopes is dangerous. So this is why it's an amazing fight. And look, when you look at the physicality and the size as well, I think Lopes is bigger, he's stronger. I think he's going to be faster on the feet also. But like I said, I think Sabatini is going to shoot on him. I think we're going to see wrestling. I think Sabatini's best chance of winning this fight is to probably actually not shoot to complete a takedown, but shoot, drive Diego Lopes against the cage and try and hold him there, control the position, make it boring, make it ugly, make it dirty and grindy, you know, really run that clock down, run the rounds down, win the rounds that way without actually having the fight hit the mat. But again, the problems that come with that is I kind of feel like Lopes is going to be the bigger, stronger guy. So is Sabatini actually going to be able to hold him there? It's just a crazy good fight, as you can probably tell from my tone and the way I'm breaking it down. It is such a good fight, but like I said, the slight striking advantages that I've got for Lopes, the slight physicality advantages I've got for Lopes, I do think Lopes is the better BJJ player as well, but like I said, there is risk that comes with that in case he does play guard off his back and loses the fight just because Sabatini is on top for longer periods of time on the clock. But like I say, the very slight advantages I do give to Lopes, there is that concern of the bottom side guard playing. But from the pick and prediction perspective, listen, I fucking love this fight. It's going to be such a good fight, but I'm picking Diego Lopes to win this fight. And talking of fights that are really good, again, we've got another one here. Matt, the steamroller Frevola versus Benoit Saint-Denis. Benoit Saint-Denis, French military, unbelievable fighter, on an absolute tear at the minute. He's looking like he's a nightmare for anybody. Forward pressure wrestler type of fighter. But guess what? Matt Frevola is also a forward pressure wrestler type of fighter. I think Frevola's probably got the slightly better striking here from a technical perspective and more power. So I think Benoit Saint-Denis is probably best suited not standing and striking. But man, it's tough to go against Benoit Saint-Denis. Against anybody else, like a lesser wrestler, you know, I'd like Frevola a lot here because he's got a good wrestling background himself, good takedowns, he's got good jiu-jitsu, good striking, like I've already said, and in my opinion, the better striker here. But Benoit Saint-Denis is just on a different level right now, in my opinion. I actually think, and this is no disrespect to Matt Frevola, but I actually think Benoit Saint-Denis is taking a slight step down from his last fight against Thiago Moises. I think Moises, again, it's not like night and day. It's not light years ahead of each other, but I think Moises is the better fighter. But the UFC have made this fight for a reason. They're not stupid. They know this is going to be fireworks. They know both fighters are going to come out trying to take their head off initially, and then we're going to see the wrestling and grappling. And I just think that Benoit Saint-Denis is the better grappler from a jiu-jitsu perspective. So when it comes to the pressure wrestling, I think it's just going to be Saint-Denis that's going to be more willing to engage in that wrestling, and therefore the pressure wrestling is going to work really well for him. Whereas I think Frevola is going to be a little bit mindful of that and try and stay on the outside and knock Benoit Saint-Denis out before Saint-Denis comes in, before he starts getting the wrestling going. So although both fighters are well-rounded and good everywhere, I think that Frevola is going to be trying to strike. I think Saint-Denis is going to be trying to wrestle. I think the wrestling, even if Frevola does come and tries to wrestle himself, the jiu-jitsu of Saint-Denis, in my opinion, is better. That gives him a better advantage on the mat. And I think that once if Frevola scores a couple of takedowns and Saint-Denis gets right back up, I think Frevola might just sack it off a little bit and look elsewhere, like I said, to his striking. But Saint-Denis won't give up. He's relentless. He's got cardio for days. He'll keep on attacking the wrestling. And I just think that forward pressure wrestling, the grinding, the relentlessness of Saint-Denis is going to be enough here. Couple that with your BJJ, which plays into the game of Benoit Saint-Denis' wrestling game and, potential wrestling game plan here. I do think that Saint-Denis got enough upside to be able to win this fight, and then I think he should be looking at the top 10, maybe into the top 5, and really testing to see where he's actually at in regards to his ceiling and his progression as a UFC fighter. But for this specific fight, amazing fight, going to be a ton of fun to watch. It must be up there with, being, a betting favourite of the favourite to win the fight of the night. But I'm picking Benoit Saint-Denis to win this fight. In the next fight, we've got a good fight here. So I did mention I've got 3 fights on my list that I'm really looking forward to. Number 1, the interim heavyweight championship between Pavlovich and Aspinall. Number 2, we've got the fight between Pat Sabatini and Diego Lopes. And the third fight is right here. It's a low-key fight, flying under the radar. We've got Joshua Van versus Kevin Borjas in the UFC flyweight division. The reason why I think it's flying under the radar, not many people will be highlighting it, I don't believe. Joshua Van, second UFC fight. Kevin Borjas, UFC debut, obviously coming from the Contender Series. And if the fight card is correct in regards to the placement of the fights, and again, this can change and does change very frequently, but as it stands at the time I'm recording this, I believe that Josh Van and Kevin Borjas is the featured prelim, which is the fight that the UFC put on there to get everybody finished off and buzzing, ready for the pay-per-view, by the pay-per-view, and that's the fight that introduces the start of the pay-per-view. There's a reason why Van in his second UFC fight and Borjas in his UFC debut are at that stage, are at that card placement as the featured prelim, because this fight is going to be absolute fireworks. Both fighters, predominantly strikers. Joshua Van, boxing heavy. Kevin Borjas, more of a little bit of a kickboxing game. He reminds me of a mini Daniel Marcos, which is ironic because they're both from Peru, but they both have very similar traits, like really good technical strikers, calm, patient, snipers straight down the middle, ripped to the body as well, will use calf kicks, and because of that, they tend to face opponents that are trying to take them down because they don't want any of the striking. But then, although they can be taken down, they've got really good get-up games, really good jiu-jitsu. So, yeah, Borjas reminds me of a mini Daniel Marcos, which, again, in my opinion, that pays big respects to Kevin Borjas because Marcos is a beast. And look, Joshua Van, UFC debut, came in, big underdog, beat Zhalgas Zumagulov by a split decision, and look, he looked good in that fight, landed 100 plus strikes. Like I say, really good boxing, forward pressure, I was going to say tends to, but he does genuinely seem like he's got really good cardio as well for his output. And again, Borjas, good cardio as well, which you do tend to find with the flyweights anyway. They're really fast, really good cardio, really exciting to watch. Just digressing a little bit, it's mental that the UFC ever even considered getting rid of the flyweight division, because some of the best fights are in the flyweight division, and this is one of them. Now, like I say, 2 predominant strikers. You look at the records, Van's 8-1, Borjas is 9-1. Borjas is 25 years old, Van's 22 years old. They really couldn't be similar as fighters. Age, record, obviously weight, height, reach, even the level of opponents. They've both fought some decent guys. They've both fought guys that was probably put in there to build them up, or maybe they had pullouts because nobody wanted to fight them on the regional scene. Both fighters are just so similar. So what that's going to give us is a really close and competitive fight. And when you look at the betting lines, you've got Kevin Borjas, who is I wouldn't say he's a big underdog, but he's like plus 175 to plus 200, depending on where you're looking. I feel like if it wasn't for Van's last fight against Zumagulov, where he won as a big underdog, the market wouldn't have overcorrected to have Van this big of a favourite. And again, like, no disrespect to Zumagulov, because he was a game fighter, but the record of Zumagulov in the UFC, he had a 4-fight contract, went 0-4, and he went to a split decision with most fighters. He's that type of fighter. So with Van winning a split decision over Zumagulov, it's not overly exciting. But in this fight, I feel like it's just going to be two really good young prospects that are developing massively from fight to fight, especially Van. Van's 22, so, Borjas's level of development at 25 will be crazy, but at 22, it's just unthinkable what, the levels that these two fighters are going to have by the time they're 30. It's going to be insane. And like I said, they're not even anywhere close to the prime either. So we're going to see a better version of Borjas, a better version of Van, and it's just going to make for an absolutely phenomenal fight. Now, again, from a prediction and a pick perspective, I'll never sit on the fence. I am going to side with Kevin Borjas. I just think that Borjas is maybe just a little bit cleaner in regards to his strikes and will maybe evade more strikes from Van. I do expect Van to be the one moving forwards, which, if this does go to a close decision, if there isn't a finish, then that could be a real plus for Joshua Van, the fact that he will be seen moving forwards. But if the judges are looking at the strikes that land versus the strikes that don't land, I think that'll be in the favour of Borjas. It's just a really good and close fight. But for the pick and prediction perspective, I'm picking Kevin Borjas to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jared Gordon versus Mark O. Madsen. And another interesting fight. I think that stylistically it could be fun as well. But when I say fun, I mean fun not from like a fireworks perspective. Fun from a technical perspective. Both fighters trying to read each other and, see who's going to have that upper hand in the game of chess, which we sometimes call as mixed martial arts. Now, Jared Gordon, he's been really unfortunate in his last couple of fights. Of course, the loss against... Well, it was initially a loss, I believe, but then they did turn it to a no contest with Bobby Green, where it was the accidental clash of heads, and that ended the fight. But that was the fight back after Gordon lost that decision against Paddy Pimblett, which I still don't understand. Well, I do understand why Gordon lost, but he shouldn't have lost. I don't think I've spoken to anybody that thinks Paddy Pimblett won that fight. And look, there's a lot of disrespect to Paddy Pimblett for that, but it's not Paddy's fault that the judges scored it incorrectly to Paddy. Paddy was still in a close fight. He was still in a fight that, made it close enough for him to win. But ultimately, I think the judges got it wrong. I think that Jared Gordon did win the fight. So look, Gordon's been it's been a little unfortunate for him in his last couple of fights. Mark Madsen on the other side, Mark Madsen's 12-1, Greco-Roman Olympic wrestler. His only loss was last time out to Grant Dawson, and look, I know what happened to Grant Dawson with Bobby Green, but I think more often than not, Dawson does win that fight, and that outcome doesn't happen. And this is coming from somebody that did bet Bobby Green a big plus 300 number. So, yeah, look, Grant Dawson's still one of the top fighters in the division. So, Mark Madsen with that being his only loss, I don't think you can really hold it against him. But when you look at this fight, look, Madsen, for him to take Gordon down and hold him down consistently, I think it's going to expend more energy than he is going to be successful. So what I mean by that is, I think Gordon will be tough to take down. I think Madsen could take Gordon down, but I don't think Gordon is slack enough from a jiu-jitsu perspective to be able to be held down by Madsen. I think Gordon can get back up to his feet. Madsen does have good wrestling, but his top game isn't that crushing, and especially at this level against somebody who is extremely well-rounded like Gordon, I think that Gordon will be fine if he's taken down. And I think after Madsen hits 2 or 3 takedowns and the energy starts to deplete a little bit, I think either A, the takedowns will start to be unsuccessful, or B, the takedowns will just stop and Madsen will go to his striking. And Madsen can strike, but again, I think Gordon's the better striker. So where Madsen's got advantages here is the wrestling. I think he can take Gordon down, but I think Gordon's defensive wrestling is better than the offensive wrestling of Madsen, which means Gordon makes it back up to the feet. And then on the feet, I think Gordon's the better and more efficient striker. I think when it comes to, just ring veteranship and experience, I think Gordon will do a good job in this fight of just being able to control the fight, use his experience and his good fight IQ to get past Madsen. So, yeah, I think that it's a difficult one for Madsen. I think that Gordon's going to have some real good advantages in this fight outside of the wrestling, but if Madsen had the insane cardio to wrestle for 3 rounds, I think Mark Madsen would win this fight comfortably, because I think the wrestling will just keep going and going and going, and we saw that with Dawson, and even Dawson started to tire at the end. I don't think Madsen's got the cardio to be relentless on Gordon, and therefore I think that's going to make it a difficult fight for him. But again, you have to consider that, look, Gordon's coming off a loss that it's still going to eat away at him, that Paddy Pimblett loss, not just because it was a loss he should have won, but because it was Paddy Pimblett, and that was the name that he should have took, the big hyped name that he should have took and didn't. And then he went in there and with Bobby Green and had the unfortunate clash of heads. So you've got the mental aspect of Gordon, but from a skill set and a style perspective, I'm picking Jared Gordon to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got 2 fighters where one of them, I always butcher the surname, and I apologise if that's the case here again. We've got Denis Buzukja versus Jamall Emmers, and of course it's the Bazooka or Buzukja. Again, I always butcher it. I'm going to go with Buzukja. But yeah, it's an interesting fight. I think Denis Buzukja, he's had a hard time in the UFC. I don't think he's had things easy. Even in the Contender Series, his fight was Melsik Bagdasaryan. And then his UFC debut against Sean Woodson, missed weight as well. So yeah, he's had a pretty rough time. And then now he's being matched with Jamall Emmers, which, look, Jamall Emmers is not unbeatable, but he's a fighter with good experience that's really starting to look like a veteran. Like a few years ago, Emmers was one of these a bit sketchy fighters in regards to, could be winning an entire fight and then just do something with, daft with a low level of IQ and, suddenly lose the fight. And he was, again, he's fought and beaten some really top guys throughout his career, but I just always thought he was one of these fighters which was a little bit inconsistent in regards to the fight IQ, and you didn't really have that full trust in him. But recently, he's not winning every fight, but what he is doing is fighting really smart. He knows what he's about. He's very controlled. You can see that his skill set is still leveling up, even though he's super experienced. And he's a really well-rounded fighter. Like, not many fighters at this level are going to get the better of him via striking, wrestling, or grappling. And if you do manage to take Emmers down, who has got that wrestling background, he's going to get back up to his feet. And this is where I think that Buzukja's going to get stuck, because Buzukja's a fighter that's well-rounded, trains with a good gym, good camp, good coaches. He's got good striking, he's got power, he can wrestle, he can grapple. Like, he's got a very well-rounded skill set. But so does Jamall Emmers. And the thing is, it's one of these fights where I don't think Jamall Emmers is night and day or light years above Buzukja as a fighter. Like, I do think Buzukja's a decent fighter, but it's one of these fights where I think Emmers is slightly better from a striking offense perspective. Striking defense, I think he's slightly better with his offensive and defensive wrestling. And I also think he's slightly better with his offensive and defensive jiu-jitsu as well. And that's not to say that Emmers is going to go out here and look for submissions. But I mean, if Emmers gets on top, I think that his offensive grappling, just being able to be calm and, control positions, is going to be better than the defensive grappling that Buzukja's going to have off his back. So it's one of these fights where one fight is not like loads better than the other, but he's just slightly better in every single area, which does make the fight always a difficult one for the fighter that is slightly lesser in those areas, because where do they get up on their opponent? I think in these types of fights, the best possibility or the best outcome for the fighter that is slightly lesser in all the areas is to just hope that the opponent's just catching the opponent on a bad night, or just making sure that you're on fire that one night. Because this is professional sports, and every athlete in every sport will have off nights. Every athlete in every sport will compete higher than what their level is and what they usually compete at. So for me, it's one of those types of fights where I think that Buzukja's either going to have an amazing night, or hope that Emmers is having a slightly off night, or maybe a little bit of a mixture of both. But from the analysis perspective, I think Emmers is just slightly better everywhere, and it's tough to see where Buzukja really gains those edges in the fight to either finish the fight, which I think is a low percentage outcome, or to win on the judges' scorecard. So yeah, for those reasons, I'm picking Jamall Emmers to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Nazim Sadykhov versus Viacheslav Borshchev. And it's a really good fight. I think it's a fight that's going to start off striking. And then I think that it's going to be a fight where it's going to turn into a little bit of a grind fest with the wrestling and grappling. And with me just explaining that, those that are listening, that are familiar with both fighters, are probably getting an instant lean to which way I'm going to pick this fight. Now, from the striking perspective, I think Sadykhov can strike. He's a good striker, good kickboxer. Will switch stances, fires punches with kicks. Volume a little bit on the low side at times. Viacheslav Borshchev, on the other hand, though, he's a fighter with 200 plus kickboxing fights, Russian kickboxer, real dangerous fighter, dangerous moving backwards as well as forwards, which is a big thing for Borshchev. I say it all the time. It's almost like a football player or soccer, if you're listening from the US, that can strike the ball or play the ball just as good with the left foot as they can with the right foot. It's very similar here, when you can strike just as well moving backwards as you can forwards, but you've also got legit power and a legit threat moving backwards. It's a massive advantage for Borshchev striking. But this is where I think Sadykhov is then going to start wrestling, because the one area of Borshchev that is a massive question mark as an MMA fighter is his wrestling and bottom side grappling. So we've seen Borshchev taken down, we've seen him controlled on the mat, and I think although Sadykhov is not this beast wrestler or this beast grappler, I definitely think he's good enough, and the guys that he trains with at the gym, Sarah Longo, his wrestling and grappling is going to be on point in this fight, I think, because they're going to know. It's not a secret. The blueprint's out there of Borshchev. Multiple fighters have shown it, of how to beat him. And I think Sadykhov's going to come into this fight and test his striking early. Maybe he doesn't want to give away a game plan early with the wrestling and grappling, but I think Borshchev's going to get the better of Sadykhov. The only danger for Sadykhov is that within those early moments striking, Borshchev is going to be very live to land something that knocks him out. But if Sadykhov can get past those early initial moments, not get knocked out or not get rocked or dropped, said both of those words combined, not get rocked or dropped, I think that Borshchev is then going to start to face a fighter that's trying to take him down. I think Sadykhov, if he gets it past those early moments, will be able to get his wrestling and grappling going and then just take away all of that danger that Borshchev possesses and just start to control the fight and run away with it. So for those reasons, I'm picking Nazim Sadykhov to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is a fight that I think a lot of people are going to look past in regards to interesting fights, but stylistically it's really good. We've got Tabatha Ricci versus Lupita Godinez. And like I say, stylistically it's really good because both fighters can wrestle, both fighters can grapple, both fighters can strike, now at least anyway. And what I mean by that is I think Tabatha Ricci is really leveling up her striking game. We saw last time out against Gillian Robertson, I was actually really looking forward to that fight because I thought we were going to see a ton of wrestling with some really good grappling exchanges. Ricci is a legit BJJ black belt. Gillian Robertson is an exciting grappler that will throw up submissions, sweeps, reversals. I thought we were going to see a really solid and fun grappling display, but we didn't see that. What we actually saw is Ricci hitting a couple of takedowns, but then standing right back up, and it was almost like two things. One, she was trying to break any striking flow of Robertson. Sorry, three things. Either one, trying to break any striking flow of Robertson. Two, trying to prevent Robertson getting the upper hand by engaging first in the wrestling. And three, just simply letting her know that she can take her down if she wants to. But what actually won Ricci that fight was the striking, and her striking looked way better than we've seen it before. Her striking looked like I said, it was developed, it was sharp, she was landing good strikes, but from a defensive perspective, she had good movement, good head movement, was sliding in and out of range fluidly, taking good angles on her strikes. And this is a fighter that normally wins her fights via wrestling and grappling, that decided that because she had a good grappler in front of her, who can also wrestle as well, Robertson can wrestle, Ricci decided that she was going to develop a striking and put on a striking clinic, and she looked really good in doing so. And if we'd not seen that fight prior, then this fight, the pick might have been slightly different, or the analysis at least, because look, Godinez can strike herself. She's got good combinations, she doesn't overexert, she's sharp, she'll mix in kicks as well, and like I say, put good combinations together, and she's tough, she'll try and come forwards whilst doing so. But Godinez's background is in wrestling. She comes from a family of wrestlers, and it's really weird because at the start of her UFC career, she was racking up like 20 takedowns over, her first X amount of fights, but then in the last couple of fights, apart from the last one that she fought, she had like only 1 or 2 takedowns. So it does seem to me a little bit like at a certain level within the UFC, Godinez is just not going to have the same success wrestling and grappling like she is at, with the lower level of UFC caliber competition. And that's where I think it might get a little bit trickier, because Ricci is at a good level. She's got really good wrestling. I wouldn't say it's naturally good traditional type of wrestling with your single legs and double legs, but she does a really good job of grabbing a single leg with the inside trip. That seems to be her go-to. But even if Godinez takes her down, the one good thing we saw from Ricci and Robertson is Robertson did actually take Ricci down once, and Ricci's grappling off her back is, really good, like good enough to make her bounce right back up to her feet against another good BJJ player. So if Godinez takes Ricci down, I think Ricci will be able to get back up to her feet. I actually think it's going to be a fight where Godinez is going to look to try and strike. I think Ricci will look to get this fight down to the mat and try and control positions on the mat. Like I said, she's a legit black belt, good BJJ topside player, and I think Godinez might mix in a little bit of wrestling as well. But again, I think Godinez is going to be more from a striking perspective. Ricci is going to be more from the wrestling and grappling perspective. Now, I would say that, look, this fight is close. I would give Godinez the advantage in this fight, though, if I'd not seen the Robertson fight, purely just because I think Godinez's striking would be a lot better. But after seeing that Ricci's developed a striking and she's not keeping her head, doing the simple things right, not keeping her head on the centre line to be hit and sliding in and out of range safely, recognising danger, all that sort of stuff, I actually think that, although I don't believe Ricci's the better striker, I think that she's going to be way more comfortable striking, enough for Godinez not to start really pulling away from the striking. And of course, that's going to help Ricci in regards to setting the takedowns up and getting Godinez down to the mat. And again, look, I know Godinez is a really good wrestler, but Ricci tends to do a really good job against fighters that you do have some question marks over if she can take them down or not, and if she can control them or not. And I don't think Godinez is up there within like the top of the division. I think this is a fight matched between both fighters that are very close to each other from a stylistic perspective and a skill set perspective as well. Then when you look at Ricci, like Ricci's only loss in the UFC is Manon Fiorot. I'm sure that was in France as well. I could be wrong about that, but she took the fight on short notice, up a weight class. Fiorot's an absolute monster in her own division now, up at the top, looking at a potential championship fight. So like, that's Ricci's only loss. Everyone else she's handled comfortably. And again, I don't think this is going to be a fight that she handles comfortably. I just think it's a really well-matched fight. It's going to be close. It's going to be competitive. We're going to see a true mixed martial arts fight with the striking, wrestling and grappling potentially from both sides as well. But I am going to side slightly with the fact that I do think this fight's going to be going to have some real solid moments on the mat, and that's where I think Ricci is slightly better with that good black belt in jiu-jitsu. So for those reasons, I'm picking Tabatha Ricci to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Kang versus John Castaneda. And again, I think this could be a fun fight. Again, another fight where we could potentially see a real mixed martial arts fight. Both fighters can strike, both can wrestle, both can grapple. And I think it makes for a really good fight. I think it's, from a skill set perspective, I think it's well matched. I don't think either fighter is really going to pull away from the other. But there's just something about John Castaneda that I cannot put my finger on. And I don't mean this disrespectfully, of course. I just cannot put my finger on. I cannot understand why. I just don't. There's something about his style that I'm just not a massive fan of, and I just don't think it might just be the control of fights. And in some fights when they're close and he starts getting the upper hand, he can't really put that stamp on fights. That might be it. I don't know. There's something with John Castaneda that I'm just not 100% sold on at all. Now with Kang I feel is a veteran at this point, tons of UFC experience. Again, he's not a fighter that I would 100% trust. He's had moments where, you've questioned what he's doing and why he's doing it. But, these are the fights at the end of the day. It's them and the coaches that prepare. So who are we really to say that? But I think in this fight, like I said, it's going to be close. I think from a striking perspective, I think Castaneda's going to be the quicker mover, the quicker striker, probably the better striker. But in regards to the grappling, I think Kang's grappling is going to be better than Castaneda's. And then that leaves you with the wrestling, which, look, Castaneda's got a slight wrestling background. Kang can also wrestle as well. I would give the slight edge to Castaneda with the wrestling, maybe just from the offensive perspective. But then if he takes Kang down, I think Kang's going to be the better grappler, got good sweeps, good reversals, good submissions. But then again, like I say, Kang's wrestling's good as well. It's not the traditional wrestling style. It's more trips and, just being efficient rather than wasting energy shooting takedowns like the doubles and the singles that he's not going to complete more often than not at this level in the UFC. It's just a close fight. I am going to side very slightly with John Castaneda, even after what I said about him. I just feel that the striking is going to be slightly better. I think he's going to be a little bit quicker, a little bit faster. I think the wrestling, even if Kang tries to wrestle, I think Castaneda may be the slightly better wrestler. So I think this fight could be won and lost on the feet, which is where I think Castaneda might have some advantages. So yeah, I'm picking John Castaneda to win this fight. And the final fight to break down, this is actually a really good fight. I'm not sure if it'll go off as the first fight of the night, but we'll see. I don't even know when it got added. I tweeted about this the other day. I know that Steve Erceg was on the card to fight Matt Schnell, I believe, but I didn't know that Alessandro Costa has stepped in. And again, the two names that I've said there, we've got Steve Erceg versus Alessandro Costa. And this is a really fun fight in the flyweight division. Steve Erceg came in against David Dvorak, massive underdog, absolutely smoked him. He's got a real good submission game, good grappling game, really tricky to deal with on the mat. His wrestling was something that I wanted to see a little bit more of prior to that UFC debut, but he got takedowns against Dvorak, who I believe is a really good fighter himself. I'm sure he was ranked. I don't know if he was ranked in the top 10, but I'm pretty sure he was ranked top 15, and Erceg came in there and just like I say, destroyed a really difficult fighter and to beat. So that's also the reason Erceg's a favourite here as well, in my opinion. I think if we'd not seen that and this was Erceg's debut fight, I think Costa would have been a big favourite, or at least a moderate favourite, up to maybe minus 200 or so. But yeah, look, it's a really good fight. And look, I really like Costa a lot. Ever since I taped him for his UFC debut against Amir Albazi, and I even bet Costa at plus 350, I think it was, against Albazi. And of course, it was a tough fight for Costa. I bet it just because I believed he was a good fighter, and, a good fighter at plus 350. It was a bet that I was willing to take. But of course, Albazi is one of the best in the division. He's going to be up and in there for a title shot at some point as well. And it just wasn't Costa's night that night. But Costa still took a round off Albazi. Yeah, he got beat eventually, but he still put up a good fight in his UFC debut. And I think Costa's got some legit skills. Steve Erceg's going to be a difficult fight for Costa, in my opinion, and this is where it's going to get really close and competitive, because I believe Costa's got the better striking, he's got more power, he's also got a BJJ background himself, so if Erceg does take him down, I think Costa will be okay with how Erceg grapples. If Erceg was a grappler where he just found his position on the mat and just laid heavy, slow shots, body head type of work, body head body type of work, if that was the game that Erceg played, I think he would have more success. But Erceg's very erratic on the mat, whereas an erratic striker would have really crazy movement, good angles, good creativity. Erceg's like that on the mat. He'll be transitioning from position to position, not giving up position over submission, but he'll be leaving gaps for Costa to be able to get back up to his feet, which I think Costa's a good enough grappler to be able to take those openings quickly and get back up. Now, Erceg's wrestling, again, I think he could have some success against Costa, but every time this fight stands back up, I think Erceg's liable to be hit by a good striker, and I think Costa is that good striker. Costa does a good job moving backwards, good job striking backwards and moving laterally is what I was trying to say. And I think that with Erceg coming in a little bit recklessly, almost like a car crash, he's a bit like Brandon Royval in a way, crazy pace, car crash coming forwards, will eat some shots to get into range, and then he's just got this crazy good grappling and submission game. So I think when he does that, I think Costa will be able to crack him on the entry. But Erceg is going to be live while this fight's on the mat. So Costa's got to be careful that he doesn't make a mistake whilst trying to get back up to his feet, leave a neck exposed or an arm exposed or anything like that. But when you're looking at, a more controlled who's the more controlled, calm fighter with moments of explosivity and being able to really get at an opponent within a certain discipline. I think that's more likely to be Costa getting at Erceg from the striking perspective, as Erceg's trying to be reckless coming in. Ultimately, I think it's going to be a really good fight, a really fun fight. I think it's going to be electric from start to finish, but I am siding very slightly with Alessandro Costa to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. I know we've been maybe 10-15 minutes longer than usual. 12 fights though, all fights really good, so I've wanted to spend a little bit more time on, you know, the real good fights and really break it down. It's an exciting card. I'm genuinely stoked to watch it. I cannot wait. And again, if you're listening and tuning in, really appreciate your support wherever you're listening from, whether that's one of the podcast platforms like Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Music, or whether you're on YouTube. If you are on YouTube, of course, drop a subscription to the channel for us. It always helps. If you do want to reply into the comments as well, that also helps the algorithms, but it's also me that responds as well. So tell me who you're betting on. Tell me if we disagree on a fight. Always happy to have that conversation. And of course, if you are betting, I hope you smash the bookies, unless you're betting against one of my fighters. Then, of course, as always, I hope that you lose. But that's it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Leave a subscription. Thank you for your support. I'm Newsom. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.